So we had a technical difficulty and I was removed from the meeting accidentally. So I am not Amanda Cody. I am Lynn Fossman on Amanda Cody's computer. The only way we could figure out to get me back in so that I could kick off this wonderful program today. I think we're going to give everybody just a few more seconds to get logged in. Hopefully nobody else had technical difficulties.
You can actually, and you can change your name if you can change the name on your picture.
Oh, I'll leave it. It's her computer. I would hate to do that to her. I just stormed into her office and said, let me introduce it. Let me launch the community lecture series from your computer. It's a
We've
good thing
all
we
had technical difficulties on Zoom and every other.
It's a good thing we had the sign in though, because we had a Zoom bomber. So Lisa thought she was booting the Zoom bomber and accidentally booted me.
Yeah.
So I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's about 3 minutes after 12. I'm Lynn Cosman, and even though my sign says Amanda Cody, it's her computer, and I appreciate her loaning it to me. This is our November Dean's Community Lecture Series, and we're going to talk about women in leadership, and we have a phenomenal panel here. And I will, after I pass things off, I will hand Amanda back her computer, but I will be listening. I'm very excited about this particular panel, and I'm sad that we need to remain virtual this month, but we hope to be able to launch in person in January, as long as there's no COVID surges over the holidays. So with that, I think I'm supposed to hand it off to Jacob to introduce our panel. Thank you for joining us today, Jacob.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dean Cosman. Well, welcome everyone to the November Dean's Lecture Series. My name is Jacob Cavazos. I manage community reinvestment at Broadway Bank in San Antonio. I also have the pleasure of serving on the UTSA Alumni Board. And so it has been a great honor to get to spend time with Lisa and Dean Cosman these last few months. Well, I produced the podcast, Birds Up Podcast, for the Alumni Association as well. And we had Dean Cosman on, and you could really tell, you know, what's the special sauce going on right now at HCaP. You could really tell that it is the people. It is Dean Cosman. It is Lisa. It is her staff that are making these great things happen. And you can, and really being able to see the impact, like events like this that they're putting on to connect us even when we're physically apart. But being in the room as she recorded the podcast, you know, the hair standing up on my arms as you can feel her passion, how she is implementing programs and bringing community together. There are great things coming at HCaP, and we're glad to be a part of it. But I am thrilled to be here with you today. Secondly, because of our panel. I've shared this with some of them and not all of them yet, but I have heard each individual of them speak separately at events and conferences. And when I heard that they were going to be all together in this environment, I got to be there for this. I got to hear this one. So you all are in for a treat. This is fantastic. We've got a great panel for you, a great discussion. I feel like to this audience, our panel probably needs no introduction, but I'm here to do it nevertheless. So if you join me for a moment, we have three fantastic panelists. I'm going to start with Janie Gonzalez, the CEO and digital engineer at Webhead. So as an entrepreneur and businesswoman, Janie Martinez Gonzalez founded and built one of the first Latina CEO web development companies in Texas in the early 1990s, which is Webhead. With the vision, grit, and technological innovation. Janie is a well-respected technologist, philanthropist, industry influencer with 25 years of professional executive experience. Her company, Webhead, is a market leader in web, business intelligence, and IT security. She is passionate and committed to propelling individuals and communities in need, and a firm believer in higher education and careers in STEAM. Janie is the newest CPS Energy Trustee, the first female Hispanic to represent the Southwest Quadrant for CPS. She also serves on the boards of Alamo Community College District's Foundation, Southside First Economic Development Council, the Greater Chamber of San Antonio, Texas A&M San Antonio Foundation, and the Smithsonian Latino Center. Janie is a San Antonio Women's Hall of Famer, San Antonio Hispanic Innovator, and has, excuse me, earned recognition in E-Myth Achievement, Compass Bank Latina Business Excellence, La Prensa Diamond Small Business, Accion Texas Microlender Entrepreneur of the Year, and celebrated by the Girl Scouts of South Texas. So Janie, thank you so much for being with us today. There she is waving. Next, we've got Susan Parmillo, U.S. Marshal for the Western District of Texas and Major General U.S. Air Force retired. Marshal Parmillo serves as the 33rd United States Marshal for the Western District of Texas. Marshal Parmillo leads the second largest district geographically in the U.S. Marshal Service. Her responsibilities encompass leading and directing operations, including security and protection of the United States courts, criminal investigations, fugitive apprehensions, execution of federal court orders, and other law enforcement activities. Prior to her appointment, Marshal Parmillo served as the 38th Sheriff of Bexar County, leading the 11th largest sheriff's office in the nation. She co-chaired the American Bar Association's Law Enforcement Subcommittee and co-chaired ABA's Law Enforcement Task Force on Body Cameras. Marshal Pomerleau served 32 years in the United States Air Force, retiring at the rank of Major General. After retirement from the Air Force, she served as Senior Vice President at USAA. Marshal Pomerleau served on board of directors and advisory groups for numerous civic and charitable organizations locally, as well as the board of directors for the Sheriff's Association of Texas. She is actively involved with Major County Sheriff's Association, National Sheriff's Association, and the American Correctional Association. The Sheriff Parmillo, thank you so much for being with us.
It's great being here.
All right. And last but certainly not least, we have Tuesdae Knight, who's the president and CEO of San Antonio for Growth on the Eastside, otherwise known as SAGE here in San Antonio. So born and raised in San Diego, California, Tuesdae studied in a Spanish immersion program where she became fluent at an early age. Continuing that education in the International Bachelor Program, her passion for all things multicultural thrived. While in college, she studied abroad as an exchange student in Uruguay, where she was also given the opportunity to serve as an interpreter for the U.S. basketball team. After graduating with a degree in Spanish, she enrolled in an MBA program for international trade. Her passion for travel has taken her to 52 countries. Starting her professional career in Houston, Texas, she has worked for Federal Express, YMCA of Greater Houston, YMCA of Greater San Antonio, and the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, and currently SAGE. Tuesdae sits on the board of directors for Family Service Association, Classical Music Institute, Lift Fund Financial Task Force, and volunteers for Habitat for Humanity, Audie Murphy Veterans Hospital, as a member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. So Tuesdae, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you, Jacob.
All right. Well, without further ado, we really wanted to jump into this conversation and hear from our panelists, but I did want to set a little bit of guidelines for us. We are going to have a little polling question here, I think, after our first question. So just be aware of that. You may see it in the chat pop up. I'll prompt you for that. And then also we're going to do some audience questions here towards the end. So if you have something for us, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many as we can towards the end. But to start things off, I really just kind of wanted to level set and baseline set for us. We're here to talk about women in leadership and navigating successes and failures and self-care. And so really wanted to start with our panelists on just kind of a general level setting question of, in your lines of work, in your careers, what is kind of the career landscape you see for women in San Antonio today? And Janie, maybe we can start with you on this one.
Sorry about that. I'm actually at a conference, so there might be some back noise. Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry. You wanted to know what I see for the future women? Well,
we were kind of looking at maybe career landscapes of women in San Antonio
I
today.
think it's brighter than it used to be. I can tell you when I started at 21, obviously I had to create my own career path as an internet operation technologist. And so today, a woman entering in computer science or data science or starting her own company is a norm now, right? Whereas before that was something that was trending. And so I do think that the current landscape is much brighter for women of color and women just in general. Now, granted, just because there's more opportunities doesn't mean that, you know, having the career or having your own business is going to be easier. I just think that it's more common and you have a lot more resources at your disposal than I did when I first started in 1994. And so it's definitely a much brighter pathway.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Tuesdae, I was curious your thoughts. I mean, you've worked a lot predominantly in the nonprofit world. What do you see from that perspective, kind of that career landscape in San Antonio?
Thank you, Jacob. When I got into working, it was never ever a thing of being a differentiation between men and women. I am a tomboy. I grew up playing basketball, volleyball, track when I was younger. And so there really wasn't a differentiation between a woman coming in and doing the work and a man, because honestly, I feel like I can do anything that I want to. And I think that there's a lot of women that are coming about and doing the same things. Over the apocalypse that I so lovingly like to call the pandemic, there were so many stories of women, not being able to stay in the workforce or not being able to handle the things that have to go with home and work and all those other things. But I didn't see any of that. There was one news station, I can't recall which one it was, but there was one meteorologist who was actually giving the weather, holding her baby. Now, if that is an inspiration, it truly was to me, because it's saying that no matter what situation a woman is in, she can do the work. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I wholeheartedly believe that in nonprofit. I believe that in for-profit. I believe that in government, and anywhere a woman could be, they should be.
That's fantastic, Tuesdae. Thank you so much. Oh, Marcia Pomerleau, I know we joked in some of our pre-call that your wealth of experience across all sectors gives you such a increased perspective and 30,000 foot view on so many things. But I'm so curious to get your view on this question as you see kind of the career landscape in San Antonio at this time.
Sure. And, let me give some perspective on sort of where we are. When I came in the Air Force in 1968, 6 months before I came in, the law was changed that allowed women to rise above the rank of lieutenant colonel or Navy commander. And it allowed women to comprise more than 2% of the armed forces. And, today we would say, oh my God, that's sexist. But that law was put into law in 1947, when we were just coming out of World War II, and we had a traditional family life. So everybody was going back to their traditional roles, as the men as providers, the women as taking care of the home. And a lot has changed since 1968. So when I came in, there were no women pilots, there were no women aircraft maintenance officers, there were no women lawyers. So all the kinds of opportunities that we have today in the military, today we've already had several women 4-stars. So, and women are able to be in combat as well. Now, some may not want that, but that's not everything that the Air Force, that the Army, Marines, Navy, they don't do all of that. And so there are just so many opportunities for women today, whether or not it's in the enlisted ranks or as an officer. And I can tell you, I was never in law enforcement before I ran for sheriff of this county. And now I'm in federal law enforcement. And so again, it's long been considered a man's world. But I'll tell you a story. I was a guest speaker at Squadron Officer School. It's all captains. And take that back, it was Air Command and Staff, so it was majors. And I commented about, this is really a man's world. And there was a young major, a woman in the back of the audience, raised her hand and said, I object to that. This is my world. And that, that took me aback for a second, but that's really the case. This is my world. It's anybody's world that wants to make it their world. And so in law enforcement, whether it's local, state, or federal, including being a corrections officer, a police officer, or sheriff's deputy, working with those on probation or parole, the opportunities really are limitless and are opening up a great deal more than what they have been before. But I just think this is, when you look at where we've come, now that was 53 years ago when I entered the Air Force. So a lot has changed for the good.
That's fantastic. Lisa, I'm thinking as Marshall's telling the story, you might have to change the tagline to this. It's my world. I love that. Well, I know. Thank you each for those responses on that. I know, Lisa, we had a polling question we wanted to put up. I think at this point, were you ready for that? Okay, we're gonna throw that up here. Here we go. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer this. What deserves your, or what drives your success?
Who's?
I guess that's for everybody to answer.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, everyone here can access that
I
poll.
wasn't gonna go first. Do you want us to go in the same order?
Oh no, actually, we're getting the all of our attendees' responses to a question here. So we've got the results. Yeah, sorry about that. We've got the results in here. So what drives your success? Interesting. Wealth got 0% of the vote, and pretty evenly spread across family and happiness, as well as other piece in there. So that's an interesting response. I was not expecting that.
And I think there'd be some differences if you ask that of men and you ask that of women.
Absolutely.
I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I also think focusing it too after the apocalypse, right? Because people had different perceptions on what happipiness looked like, because people had to either stop working to support family, to, take these different perspectives. And before, I think some of those answers might have been higher, but I think with the apocalypse, people really did take an evaluation of work-life balance and what became more important.
Absolutely. And I know we've seen that in the private sector. I know, Janie, you probably can speak to this as a business owner. I mean, people making decisions for reasons other than money, or sticking with a job or moving jobs. I'm sure I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit, but I think across the board, we've kind of all seen reprioritization of those kind of things.
Well, for me, it was different. What I saw carry us through the pandemic were really single mothers. I mean, my dream team really became women. And, I didn't see a lot of them saying, you know what, I get the pleasure of, just staying home or whatever the case would be. So for me, my perspective is different. I mean, for me, what drove my success was breaking barriers, paving the way for others. And I think in many ways, that's what drives me, right? What motivates me and drives me is that example of women during the pandemic lifting Webhead and getting us through it. We bonded, they had their kids come to office, we really, really bonded over this past almost 2 years. And so, again, different industries had different flexibility, but for us as a small business, it became mission critical a lot of our clients are the Department of Defense. So we didn't have a choice. We were essential workers. I might have not been a paramedic or a doctor, but we were, again, critical infrastructure had to be maintained by somebody, right? And so I'm really proud to let you know that 65% of our workforce is now females. And so what you're finding is, as again, you see different the workforce development makeup has changed as an employer, you have to be responsive to that, right? So, I can say that a lot of people have had work-life balances. I think what we do best is you got to do what you got to do to take care of business. And then, again, being an employer who's always been open and accommodating and having flex schedules or children be at work. I mean, you just really respond to the need and you help each other out. I mean, I basically became the backup quarterback for everybody when they had family needs. And so I found myself probably working more hours than I did when I was a startup, but you got to do what you got to do for your team.
Right.
And I think sometimes we look at some issues like this and we think, oh, how on earth am I going to deal with this? But there are so many different kinds of, whether it's industry or jobs or companies that make these kinds of allowances for their employees, that this is far different than when it used to be 8 to 5 or whatever the work hours were, that if you couldn't meet those, then you didn't have a job. And there's so much more flexibility today than what there has been in the past.
Yeah, those are great comments. And actually, that kind of dovetails nicely into the next kind of topic we wanted to hit. We talked about kind of opportunities and what the landscape looks like now. We wanted to transition a little bit to what challenges look like currently. Obviously, as Marcia Pomerleau talked about, like those challenges have drastically shifted since the 60s, but they still are here. So maybe Marcia Pomerleau, we can start with you on this one. What kind of challenges are facing women in leadership today, and what are some ways to overcome those?
Well, one, I would say, and just an example of what we did in the federal judicial system is obviously we weren't having in-person court any longer. And there were some who just, they thought there's no way that we're going to do Zoom court. A lot of people who were naysayers are now sold on it. So it's provided us more opportunities, more tools to do our job. And, one of the things in terms of challenges, I think there's obviously top of the list so often is balancing family with work. But also I've seen some women tend to be timid and may lack confidence in stepping up and taking on leadership roles. And so many times I've said, never tried, never failed, never failed, never learned. And, the way we learn best often is through failures and stepping right back up and getting back in there and hitting it again. And so often when someone's afraid that they're going to fail, they need to have that experience. And so, but I also think women have more tools in their belt because we bring different experiences real quickly. When I was in the Air Force, it was always the commander's wife who was the chair of the commissary advisory committee. And I thought, okay, when I get to be a colonel and I'm a base commander, my husband is not going to be the president of the commissary advisory committee. I think I've got better ideas on how we can do that. Even today in law enforcement, where we talk about mental health that law enforcement deals with, whether it's their own or whether or not it's individuals that are in the judicial system. women have been shown to have better skills in terms of talking with individuals, de-escalating the situation. And so we found that there are so many opportunities for women because they can look at things from different perspectives.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tuesdae, I wonder if we could move to you, kind of what you see in your industry, in your line of work, as far as challenges, being able to overcome them, in current day.
Yeah, well, I think challenges continuously change. From what they are today are completely different than what Marshall was talking about, because I think that, again, things are continuously changing. So I'm a servant leader. I've always been a servant leader. And one of the things that I really hang my hat on is being able to find what the need is and try to find what the answer to fix it can be. So whenever we try to do that, women, we're more empathetic. We place ourselves in the position of the person that we're working with. A lot of times our communication is better. Sorry, men. But we have a different way of communication. And I think specifically with the women that we have now, and just like Janie, a lot of my workforce are women. And we had to figure out different ways and things to focus on those challenges. So some of the challenges that we really did face in my industry was really mental health. That is an issue that doesn't belong to women or men, but the mental health of women, because we were at home. Are the ones that are typically the ones taking care of family, as they mentioned earlier. And then we still were the ones that were driving this workforce. Almost every task force that I sat on, almost every committee, almost every board, it's a majority women right now. And that's beautiful to see. I mean, our city council is mostly women. So, when you talk about challenges, they're continuously changing, but they still say the same. Women have sometimes a harder path ahead because, again, it is that fear of failure. And Susan, I agree with you because, I always tell my team, don't be afraid to fail, because failure is the first attempt in learning. And so if you fail, so what? Try it again. Do whatever it is, just do it differently, but don't stop trying, because that is the biggest challenge, is when we stop trying, when we don't have faith in ourselves, when we don't believe that we can do it, because we are, unfortunately, our biggest enemy. I know I am sometimes. I talk myself out of a situation before I can even get into it sometimes. So I think the thing for these women on this call to understand is have confidence, have faith in yourself, and don't be afraid to fail.
That's fantastic advice. Janie, I wanted to move to you on this one. Absolutely.
Sure. So my perspective is different. So I can give you the perspective outside of Webhead. So if you look at all those statistics, the pandemic really wiped out a lot of women in the workforce. They had to choose between career and their kids at home. And so I do think that the pandemic actually set women back like by 1950s as far as workforce opportunities and careers. Now, as far as like as an employer, what do I see are the biggest challenges? To me, I think it's always an opportunity versus a challenge. I think that, with I've always been able to just view at what's going on and say, okay, how do I leverage what's going on? And so one way that you can leverage, women who want flexibility, not everybody wants to work full time. So then you can pivot and have more part-time employees. I think the other opportunity that I saw with a pandemic was, an opportunity to spin out another company, an opportunity for women to have a side hustle, the micro entrepreneurs. So, there's always going to be setbacks, whether it's the pandemic or not. It's really having the foresight or the vision to look at what's not working, but look at how can I take advantage of whatever is going on. And I think that oftentimes we like to focus, on what's not working. I always like to focus on how can I leverage this opportunity, whether it's for the betterment of the company, betterment of the community, or betterment for other women in the industry. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that mental health is a big one, anxiety, people are burned out. I think the other thing that I see as an employer, there's a lot of distraction. I do get people who worked at home decided again to do the side hustle. And so now they're going back to work, but they have the full-time jobs, and you still see them, you know, doing a side hustle, you know, and so, I mean, again, they're doing for themselves, but I do think though that, you know, we're still going through a transition of adjusting, and it's going to take us a while there. But again, there's always an opportunity through transitions. There's always an opportunity to learn and grow, you know, and again, I think that different people, different circumstances will have an opportunity, again, to leverage, to grow, to prosper. But my advice is, you know, it's not so much about being fear. I mean, I've always been about, you know, don't be, I mean, and I differ. I don't think that people are afraid of fear. What I have found, especially being a Latina, is you know, I've been blessed to hire a lot of minority employees. I attract them also. And what I find, it's culture versus them being afraid. When you're raised the way I was raised, with the servant mentality of give, 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 sometimes when you have the opportunity to step up into leadership culturally, you struggle with that. I don't think it's fear. It's just that you've never have had empowerment to be in that position of authority. You've had empowerment to do for others. And so I think that what I've really focused on is that when I empower people at Webhead, it's not that I believe that they're fearful. I believe that they just have to learn how to be in a position of authority. And that's very different. So my perspective is different on that. I don't think women are afraid. I think that it's more about not being in the position to do it. So if you don't know how to do it, you know, then you just don't do it. You know, I don't think it's fear.
And let me correct, I did not say that women were fearful. So I want to make sure I'm clear about that. So.
No, that's okay. Janie, I was wondering if I could ask you a follow-up on that.
Sure.
How have you experienced, you know, maybe showing somebody how to how to empower someone? How do they then take that next step? How, in your experience, how have you gone down that road, you know, with some of your employees?
Having one-on-one conversations and letting them know that you have a vision. I think sometimes people have a hard time articulating a vision for themselves. And part of leadership is when you see something special in someone, is to be able to bring that and provide them with, again, say, hey, you know what, you're really good at this. I can see you doing X, Y, and Z. Have you ever thought about that? And then you start with providing them an opportunity. Here's a project, run with that. Oh, you know, you want to do X, Y, and Z. You know what? I'm going to sponsor that initiative for you. Oh, you're thinking of doing this. I mean, it really is about, you know, leadership, honestly, is not just about being in charge, but leadership is also identifying talent, right? And so part of your job as a CEO, as a leader, is to say, you know what? Melissa can do this. Oh, you know what? I see something special in somebody else. And your job is to really coach them to be there. You know, I've never considered myself a mentor because I don't have time, but I definitely do believe in leading through example and providing, you know, a hand up, not a hand out. You know, leadership is about, again, you know, seeing talent, recognizing talent, working with that talent, and also being fair to understand that not everybody will get there at the same pace. You got to honor people's individuality and then honor, again, their natural talents. And then as a leader, you have to figure out how to put them in the right situation for success. And so really, that's just been my formula to work with others.
Yeah. And let me add to that. And Janie, I think you put it so well and are a great example of a leader in your company and to lots of other people as well. And exactly what you said, you've got to be an example. And there's some professions today that are have sort of similar attitudes to what there were back in the 70s when I was, you know, just really getting started in leadership. And I remember there were some issues. It was the first exercise that women had gone on in large numbers. And it was in 1975. And the senior woman there, I was a captain. The senior woman at the time was a colonel or lieutenant colonel, and I'd known her from before. And so I took some issues to her that I was hearing from the enlisted women. And her comment was, well, honey, if you think this is bad, you should have been in Vietnam. And hopefully we are past that kind of attitude, because it's so important to help others, because sometimes individuals don't see what their own talent is. And it takes people like us to recognize that and encourage them. And then also, when you see that kind of attitude, you think, that's not going to be me. In fact, I think you learn your best lessons in leadership from people who are negative, and from bad leadership. I certainly did. And so you may work for somebody that is not that encouraging, but you can still learn a lot just from them.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Marshall. Tuesdae, I was wondering if we could circle back around with you. I know you mentioned kind of having that servant leader perspective and that servant heart. Where, as far as coaching, developing, mentoring, how have you found that that's been successful? I know you've managed, many, many people over the years.
That sounds horrible, but yes.
Well, let me interject 1 minute. I know that Tuesdae and Janie do not manage people.
That's
they
true.
Lead people.
Very
and
true.
You manage things.
Thank
Very
you, Marshall. Thank you, Marshall. Absolutely. And that's 100%. So, I think for me as a leader, I always try to lead, again, with empathy. I always try to lead with understanding, and also with a belief. I believe in people more so sometimes than other people do, or themselves even, because I think that you have to have that person in your corner. I think somebody put in the chat, you have to have a mentor, or how do you find a mentor, or, what do you want out of this whole thing that we call a work career? You have to find those people that you want to mimic, that you want to be like. And I think you do have those experiences, like Marshall said, in having those bad experiences with bad bosses or bad jobs or whatever the case may be. And you learn to not be that way. And so that's how I try to lead. I try to lead with heart. I try to lead with understanding. I try to lead with, hey, if you don't have faith in you, I'm going to have faith in you until you do. And so, I think by giving people opportunity, by throwing them sometimes into situations where they may be uncomfortable. Now, I'm not throwing them in there by themselves. Of course, I'm going to coach them and I'm going to make sure that they're in the right place. But you want to give people opportunity. You want to give people the chance. And that's all we want. We want to make sure that we are able to be in that space, that we're able to succeed, and that we have the support. And we do. And my team does. My team always has. And so even though, sometimes they might find themselves in a precarious situation or something that they don't understand, they're never alone. I never feel like my staff should be able to do anything without me doing it. I've always also believed that anything my staff know how to do, I should be able to do too. Because, as Janie mentioned, being that quarterback, you kind of have to be as the leader. Again, during the apocalypse, there were people who, had doctor's appointments or who came down sick, unfortunately, or, had any type of issues happening. And I had to be able to step in, but I had to know how to do their job. And so it takes a leader to be able to say, yes, I'm going to support you. Yes, I'm going to be there for you, but I'm also going to be there just in case you can't be there, because I'm going to be the person that's going to help you. And I continuously believe that with my staff. They know that. Anybody that I've ever worked with still thinks that they can call me because they can. And, I think that you just have to really be that person that people can rely on, and you have to keep your word. You have to do what you're going to say that you're going to do.
I love that. Well, thank you each of you for sharing kind of those perspectives on your leadership styles and your philosophies there. I think that's really impactful for our whole audience here. I had one more question for the full group here, and Tuesdae, maybe we can start with you on this one. But I know, as we all get together in these sessions like this, I know sometimes we think, well, what can I tangibly take away? What can I, what am I going to learn and be my takeaway from this session? So, we were talking about maybe how do we become agents of change? How do we become, leaders in our own community? What are some steps that I might take? to move that along, or what do I need to work on to learn something to move forward in that way? So I was wondering if maybe we can start with you on that one.
Well, I think the first step is trying. When I mentioned again, my acronym for failure or fail, I have always been, and I've always been an advocate for try it out. If you like it, do it again. If you hate it, run away screaming. If you don't try, you're not going to make it. It's a basketball thing that, you say you never make the shot that you don't take. And so you have to take the shot. You have to try it. And guess what? If you do not make it or it doesn't work out, so what? What is the harm? There is no harm in trying, but you have to put yourself out there to do it. And so if my thing is that if you see something that you want to do, why not? Find somebody that's in that industry, find somebody that's in that job, find somebody that you can reach out to. And guess what? Most people who are in these positions welcome that type of conversation. They want you to come over and talk to them because we want to see other women in our places. We want to see other women in any environment that I talked about earlier. And so if you are timid, or if you have a concern, or if you just really don't even understand how to get into something, ask, because I can guarantee you anybody on this call, anybody on this panel would take your call in a heartbeat. They would be able to coach you. They would be able to talk to you. Now, I don't know about them, but schedules do get crazy and sometimes it's a little bit hard, but our heart is there and we do want to help. So I think that the advice for this group is really, if it is something that you're interested in, make an attempt, because again, you're never going to make that shot if you don't take it.
Love it.
Let me throw in a little bit different perspective.
Absolutely.
From a senior leadership position. And when I was the vice commander of the Air Force Personnel Center, and of course, one of the things that we did is we made all of the assignments for enlisted personnel all the way through lieutenant colonels. And, there was a functional team for personnel officers, for pilots, for navigators, for space operations. And I remember going by when I was headed to my next assignment, and I was a colonel at the time, just been selected for brigadier general. And I walked out to a place we called the fighter porch, and that's where the fighter team was. And one of them said to me, you really made a difference. And just because you were a woman, you didn't just focus on mentoring and providing opportunities for women. You did that for everybody. And I think one of the things, especially being in personnel arena, HR, was our job is to assure that we develop everyone to their fullest potential. And that fullest potential may be at different levels. But if we don't mentor those people, if we don't make sure they have the opportunities, then we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting the organization we're in.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Janie. Can you repeat again your question?
Yeah, absolutely, Janie. Absolutely. So talking about takeaways, kind of some tangible things from today, talking about how can we become agents of change or leaders in our community? What does that look like from your perspective?
I mean, it's a little bit building upon, I always raise my kids and used to tell them to show up. It's different than trying, right? Like, I think Tuesdae said, try it. For me, sometimes just show up. And show up to me is, you got to sometimes, again, you got to crawl before you walk. And before you walk, you got to run, right? So sometimes just showing up to an event, showing up to, a cause, just showing up, that's the beginning of that process, right? I think the other thing is like, I go back to vision. You gotta figure out what's that vision for myself. Where do I see myself going? And then Google everything. I mean, Google is at your fingertips. I mean, like literally, if you want to become a rock star, look it up. I mean, we can look up how to get the perfect makeup, like Kim Kardashian, we can look up and say, how do I become the most effective CEO? How do I become a data scientist? How do I become the mayor of San Antonio? There's a lot of information at your disposal. Do it market research to really determine who you want to be, where do you want to go, how you want to start a company is just as important as showing up. And so my perspective is different. I do think that the power of the internet, the power of social media also has exposed you to different ways of, identifying influencers, a way to connect, in other cities and other countries. And so, we should leverage what we have at our disposal and not do things traditionally. I think that today you can do so many different ways of building a career for yourself that we didn't have at our fingertips, 27 years ago when I started Webhead.
Yeah, that's interesting. It was interesting when you were talking about, show up, just show up. My mind kind of went to, these luncheons or these galas or these breakfasts that we all seem to go to. From your experience, is that where your networking kind of begins? And would you talk through that maybe a little bit of how that works within
Sure. I mean,
in that process?
Obviously Tuesdae, no, I think that's how I met Tuesdae. Yeah, I mean, and the way I did it was actually really different. So when I first started Webhead, I actually started Webhead on the west side of San Antonio where UTSA is at. And I didn't know anybody in the industry. So what I did, someone had told me you had to join a chamber. So I went through the phone book, we didn't Google it back then. And I called every chamber and I couldn't afford any of the chambers, frankly. So I ended up speaking to Colonel Casiano, who at the time was the chamber president for the West San Antonio Commerce. And he said, Janie, you are this future. I have no idea what the internet is. So I want you to not only join for $50, mind you, I want you to also become a board of director. And so what I did was I leveraged that opportunity and I actually built the first website for the first Chamber of Commerce. Believe it or not, it was a West Side Chamber of Commerce. Wow. And then that led to me being invited as a marketing person and board of director to all these events. And then through the event, through networking, then you start building advocates and a close network, and so, yeah, network is really important, whether it's offline or online. I think, obviously now I have both offline and online strategies to build communities, globally as well as nationally as locally. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people will choose to join an association like the UTSA Alumni Association, for example, so sometimes you start with something that you're comfortable with, and then you just build upon that and you expand your network.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tuesdae, I was thinking of you. I mean, you're the person who's hosting these events many times. Do you see that as an avenue for women to be able to build their networks that way? Is that one of the main things that you're looking for?
Absolutely. But here's the thing. I am a lover of networking. I think it is the best way to go. I think, every position I've ever been in, I've always been in a position to have networking events or manage some type of networking something. And I believe in it wholeheartedly. Now, the pandemic changed how people network. And so we still need to do it. Just because you're not going to those things and we're not going to a gala, a lunch, a dinner, a happy hour every single week, you have to do them in different ways. And you have to really research how to do those things because the opportunities are there, but you still have to do it. I believe in being a collector of people. And being a collector of people means that when you meet somebody, it doesn't necessarily have to be at a networking breakfast or dinner or whatever. You meet somebody, you get their card, you get their information, send them a note, keep their information. Because you never know going forward if you're going to need to reach out to that person because they may be able to help you get in the door to a new business or help you get a job somewhere. And so you always want to make sure that you keep people and be a collector of people like I am, because I can guarantee you it will pay off in spades. You will end up meeting people and being able to reach out to that network. And so again, now that things have changed because of the pandemic, it is different, but it's still important. And this, generation, unfortunately, doesn't have the same skill set. It's one that sometimes you have to build. And there are a lot of people, because I teach networking and etiquette. So I know there's a lot of people that are afraid inherently on how to talk to people, how to call people, how to even send an email. But again, I am one of those people that is just try it. And, it might not work out, but chances are very likely it will. And so, you know, my only advice really is just continue networking, do it any way that you can, reach out to anybody that's on this call, connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with them on, you know, social media or whatever, if you can't find their information, but reach out, talk to people, because I guarantee you that most people are willing to network because things are so different now. And again, most people do realize the importance of it. So I wholeheartedly believe in networking.
Fantastic. Marshal,
Well,
I would think that your perspective might be a little different on it, but I assume that it's the same sentiment there, the importance of that in your life.
And Jacob, let me add a couple of things here. We've talked a good deal about being in senior leadership positions, or certainly at higher levels. And I think somebody had asked the question about, I don't want to be a CEO or a director, but I want to lead. Everybody can be a leader. And I remember going through officer training school, and I didn't get an opportunity to be in an officer position as a cadet. And the feedback I got was my roommate was having some difficulty, and I really didn't reach out and help her figure out the ropes. And so we teach in the Air Force, from whether or not it's in basic training or whether it's in officer training school or the academies or ROTC, everybody is a leader. And it's just like when you're a team member and the team has gone off track or something, you can be a leader in bringing that back to what you're focused on. The other part, my first assignment to the Pentagon, and I describe this as every organization has what I call DLJs, dirty little jobs. They're not glamorous. They don't get a lot of focus. They don't get highlighted as doing these great and tremendous things. But it's an important job because it would not be funded by the organization or by the federal government or whatever. But those DLJs, what I always looked for was somebody, didn't matter what the job was, that did an amazing job, whatever it was. And I can tell you, my first job in the Pentagon was building the backup books that the 3-star took over to Congress. Now, I was 3 or 4 levels down, but every paper that came across this 3-star's desk that he wanted in that book, they just sent it down to me, and really I was a file clerk. But I read every single piece of paper that came across my desk, and in less than a year, I was briefing the entire Air Force program outside of the Pentagon. So it's not what the job is, it's what you put into it.
Absolutely. It almost sounds like treating everything like an opportunity.
It is.
Yeah. Marshall, I was wondering if I can get your perspective on this too. One of the other questions that got sent to me through the chat was balancing education versus experience.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because I thought you could probably take that a couple different ways,
So let me, and I'll tell you I've seen a number of people who didn't get a college degree or didn't get an advanced degree, and then they didn't make the list for promotion. And so education and getting it early is really important. And as you are considered for additional opportunities and bigger jobs, what education does for you, it helps you develop critical thinking skills. And it also helps you be able to articulate big ideas in a very precise way. And I remember, in the Pentagon, you filled out a staff summary sheet that might have gone up to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And if you can't explain that, that critical issue in less than a page, that information is not going to get to who it needs to go to. Or they'll be yawning by the time they get to the point that you're just getting into it. So getting that education to where you can explain challenging issues, complex issues, and think about what needs to be our priority. And as Janie was saying, what's our vision? How do you contribute and how do you plan to achieve that vision? But education, and as early as possible, is really important. I got my master's degree going to school at night. Even as a sheriff, I hadn't been in law enforcement, but I had to get my peace officer license in less than 2 years, and I did it in 11 months, going to ACOG Law Enforcement Academy at night and on weekends.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I know we've got about 2 minutes left here. Janie and Tuesdae, wanted that same question there, education experience, and balancing that, and wrap us up there with those thoughts.
I mean, I was a non-traditional student, so I kind of had to do it all. So when I actually went to undergrad and graduate school and started Webhead at the same time. And so I do believe that one of the key components is actually leveraging your internships and work study programs to gain experience. I'm a life learner. I think that you just got to figure out how to make the time to learn. And again, you have so many more opportunities today with 24/7 online learning opportunities. So professional development is important. And I think you need both. Now, some will argue today you no longer need a 4-year degree. You can get certificates. I mean, again, you have to decide what works for you. And again, not everybody will go from A to B to C. I've known a lot of people who started with, a certificate, then from a certificate was an associate, from an associate was a bachelor, from a bachelor's was a master's and a PhD. I mean, that's an example. My sister, Dr. Jessica Ibarra, I mean, it took her a while, but she did it her way. At the end of the day, when you get a degree, it doesn't say 3 years, 4 years, it's a degree. And that gives you credibility and access, to your future. And so, I mean, I'm a big advocate of higher education, but I'm also a very big advocate of do what's best for you. At the end of the day, you answer to yourself. You don't answer to anybody else.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
And I'll jump in, Jacob, and I'll try to be real quick because I know we're on a lot. So I believe that there's a really close synergy between education and experience. There is a really a big need for every single job in anything that we're doing, right? So not only what people are learning in education at UTSA and other universities, but also just on a day-to-day basis. I had somebody here today that came in because a pipe burst and they needed to fix that. Well, I don't think he went to school for it, but he learned through experience. And I needed him to be here because although I am right now currently getting my PhD, I couldn't fix it. I mean, I could have Googled it, but it wouldn't work. And I'm sure it would break tomorrow. So there are a lot of people that really get that education through experience. And again, education isn't for everybody. My sister speaks 7 languages. She has a photographic memory, but you know what? She went to 7 colleges. So school just wasn't for her. But it doesn't mean that she's not successful in what she does. And so what the education and the experience line is that you need both. You need to have the job to get the experience. You need to have the experience to get the job. There's a really close synergy with all of that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to take this opportunity. Thank you all, first of all, for coming today and participating in the in our discussion. Thank you to each of our 3 panelists for being with us. Your vision, your leadership, your experience, your commitment to our community. We just can't thank you enough for that. And thank you for your commitment to UTSA and helping this university grow. So without that, thank you all I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today for the Dean's Lecture Series.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you,
Thank you
Lisa.
all.
Thank you, Dean.